Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, one of the bedrock principles of functioning democracy is confidence in the outcome of our elections. And obviously with COVID came a number of changes to state election laws that were done so in violation of the Constitution. So I guess I want to start by asking Ms. Evans, were changes made to the manner in which DC conducted its elections because of COVID?
Yes.
And how were those, was it a council vote? Who approved and who authorized those changes?
There were different changes made. I can't say there's a wholesale answer.
Did City Council vote on those changes?
There were changes that were made with the authority that the DC Board of Elections currently has to make changes.
The DC Board of Elections does not have authority to change the election laws.
Not change the election. I said decisions were made regarding the election. The DC Council did pass emergency legislation during the height of the pandemic, yes.
Did any judge change your election laws?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Well, you know, we've had a lot of issues with confidence in the outcome of the 2020 elections because many unelected bureaucrats, some elected officials, and federal judges and state judges and a wide variety of people made changes to election laws that are not allowed under the Constitution. So South Carolina, and you know, I guess people don't realize this. People always say the Supreme Court turned down every argument, every case that was challenging the outcome of any election. That's actually not true. That's not true. One case was heard on the merits, and it was unanimously voted on by the Supreme Court as it relates to South Carolina's unconstitutional changes that were done by a federal judge. So what happened is the General Assembly appropriately got together and said, we have a pandemic, and we want to keep people safe, and they made changes to the state of South Carolina's election laws in accordance with the Constitution. And a group of people that did this across the country got together and tried to change our election laws in South Carolina. And the federal judge, you can guess who appointed her, overturned the state's recently adopted COVID-friendly election laws. And it was kind of chaotic. Fourth Circuit originally overturned her, then overturned the initial ruling, and then the Supreme Court, 9-0, said that the federal judge was not entitled to make changes to South Carolina's election laws because that's just not how the system works. So the same thing happened in Arizona and Georgia and Pennsylvania and all states all over the country, and that's why people didn't trust the outcome of the election. Who knows whether those changes would have made a difference, but you know, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the dissenting opinion said, we know for a fact that 15,000+ people voted that were not legally entitled to vote because a judge changed when the registration deadline was, and that was not within their purview to do. So, you know, we have all these challenges across this country, and I hope that we can learn from them. I hope that we can learn from the mistakes that were made. I realize that the pandemic has justified so many decisions, and I think reasonable minds can differ at the time whether those were appropriate, but I think in retrospect, many of the decisions made during the pandemic were not in the best interest of our citizenry and did in fact not help to push this country forward, to overcome it. So, you know, whether DC legally or unconstitutionally allowed everybody to vote that, I mean, y'all had 50,000 ballots that were returned as undeliverable, is that right? 48,018, is that correct, Ms. Evans?
Which election are you referencing?
The 2020 election. The stat I'm looking at here says that you sent out 421 ballots ahead. Universal mail-in voting doesn't work. It doesn't facilitate confidence. I would argue that the fact that 11.4% were returned as undeliverable is exactly why universal mail-in voting is ridiculous, but I guess reason why can differ. One last thing, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a 2016 report from the DC auditor showing that DC did in fact fail its own audit. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Without objection, and the gentleman yields back. In consultation with the ranking member, we'd like to give each of our witnesses 2 minutes for closing remarks. Then the ranking member and I will each take 4 minutes for closing remarks. We'll then gavel the committee hearing closed. We'll start with you, Ms. Weiser, if you'd like to say anything in conclusion of the hearing, up to 2 minutes.
Thank you very much for this hearing. I wanted to close where I started by underscoring what I believe are serious risks to our elections heading into going forward, from disinformation that is sowing distrust about the elections, fueling vote suppression efforts, causing people to try to tamper with election equipment and meddle in election results, and fueling a climate of harassment and even violence. I think these are really serious risks. These are things that I really do hope Congress will take seriously and address nationally, not just focused on DC. And I strongly urge this Congress to revisit and pass the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act, which actually would address each and every one of these problems. And as well, I want to make sure that Congress also ensures the local self-determination for DC's residents and grant them full citizenship and statehood in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much.